EJ, it's that time once again. 10 Gems is upon us. Today is part one of our 10 Gems specials. We do offense and then we do defense. I've had some pretty notable alumni come through the bootleg 10 Gems in past years. This is year 6 of doing it. Once upon a time, Jalen Hurts, recent Super Bowl MVP, was a bootleg offensive gem back in 2020. Michael Pittman was a gem. Tyler Smith, once upon a time, at tackle and guard, was Jeb. Chris Olave, of course, Brock Bowers last year was probably the best player that we highlighted on our Gem special last year. Had our fair share of misses too, but usually we come out with a decent number of hits. My friend, how are you?
I'm tremendous. This is one of my favorite things that we've ever come up with. And again, we did it the very first year kind of on a whim, like, hey, we need an episode and we just want to talk about some guys that we really like. And that's the definition of a bootleg gem. And it might be my favorite thing about a bootleg gem is that they don't have to be the top producer. They don't have to be a first round pick. They don't have to be anything except a football player that when we turn on the tape, we go, damn, I like the way he plays the game. That is one of my favorite things. And yeah, some hits, some misses for sure. Definitely some down the board guys in the past. Honorable mentions have grown into a thing on Gems. It's all good. It's all fun. We waited a little bit later this year so we could hone in, see a little bit more of the class. And I'm excited about the 5 I've got. That's for sure.
Kind of perusing our list here, I estimate we have 4 first rounders on the list for this year's edition and probably 6 day 2 to fringe, like early day 3 guys. Most of them going to be day 2. So, if you want late round sleepers, this year we're not diving into those as much, mainly because, these were just the ones that we had the most fun watching, and guys that are fun to watch tend to go earlier in the draft. So if you want late round sleepers, we will do a show dedicated to that. Today is mostly about pretty darn good players are going to be top like 100 to 150 picks. Starting off, of course, EJ with your first gem, who I'd be surprised if he's anything but a top 20 to 25 pick.
I bet he will be, but before we dive into him, I know folks are going to be asking, I want to preempt the comments. We're not going to be talking about Ashton Jeanty today. Ashton Jeanty is absolutely a gem.
By the way, also a top 25 pick.
Yeah, for sure. It might even be a top 5 pick in this class. The reason we're not talking about Jeanty is we're going to be talking about him a lot in pretty much every episode we talk about. He is going to be a driver of this draft. And frankly, he's a little bit of a superhero. If people are going to be upset that we go chalk in any particular special, talking about Ashton Jeanty is a little bit unfair because I could say something like, Cam Scattaboo led the league or led the nation with 100 missed tackles forced. And you'd be like, wow, that's amazing. Ashton Jeanty had 152, right? I could say that, Omarion Hampton had 1,200 yards after contact. And I might later on in this special, who knows? Ashton Jeanty had 1,970, almost 2,000 yards after contact. It's the kind of stuff, it's like Paul Bunyan stuff. You look at it and you go, that's not real. So Ashton Jeanty, great player, not going to be a gem this year, but is absolutely one of the best football players in this draft, and we will talk about him ad nauseum. So we wanted to give some spotlight to other guys. I'm going to start off with one of the other guys, Emeka Egbuka, who's a guy that I've been waiting to talk about, really, it feels like, for years. And the thing about Emeka for me this year is I think some people have kind of forgotten about him. It almost feels like he peaked last year. It was possible he was going to come out. He chose to go back to Ohio State, ends up winning a national championship. Great for him. But it's not like he got any worse as a football player. He just kept getting better. Terrific routes, a real technician on the field, varies the speed of his release, pushes the stem of the route beautifully, better than probably almost any other receiver in this draft, technically. And we can thank Brian Hartline, the Ohio State wide receivers coach, for all this stuff. He also blocks his ass off. That, too, is a Brian Hartline staple. But he's impactful. He's versatile. He ran routes out of the backfield. They ran him as a halfback this year, which was kind of fun. He's a tremendously polished plug-and-play wide receiver. He is vicious out of the slot. He can play in any alignment. I am not sticking him to the slot and saying he is only that, but I believe he's best there, but it doesn't matter. You can make him a number 1, a number 2, a number 3. Is he going to be the true sort of X down the field receiver? Probably not his best fit, but anywhere on the other side of the field for pretty much any team in the league, Emeka Egbuka is going to be a tremendous addition because he just feels like a pro at this point.
And, you know, people are obsessed with getting X receivers, and I have a couple, you know, potential X receivers in my gems list this year. But being an X doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best receiver on any given team. Like, you could argue, not even argue, you could just flat out say that, yeah, Mike Williams played a lot of X for the Chargers, but their best receiver was Keenan Allen back in the day, who lined up mostly in the slot or at Z, you know, off the line of scrimmage. So he can still be a number one, even if he's not, you know, lined up on the line of scrimmage. Matt Harmon has a term called the sacrificial X, which is, you know, he's going to take the press corner and just run him deep. Well, like, the actual number one does all the, you know, production stuff. Like Cooper Kupp, you could argue, for a while, was a number one out of the slot when they had a sacrificial X outside who just took away a press corner. So it doesn't mean he can't be a number one. It's just about where he lines up and what his skill set is. And I agree with you. Like, he is a very Chris Olave-ish, not to use a similar body type from the same school as a lazy comp, but like, he's a very Chris Olave-ish type of receiver in terms of where he's going to line up and where he's going to do his damage. And Chris Olave, another former bootleg Chem, like we said, pretty darn good. So if I'm thinking, okay, I can get a guy who looks like Chris and talks like Chris and moves like Chris anywhere in the first round, like, that seems like a pretty good value to me. So I think he is a slam dunk first round pick. Hell, he might end up going back home to Seattle, seeing them jettison two of their receivers, and he's a Seattle kid. Well, I don't know. Would you technically count?
You know, that's one of those things. It's one of those things like Chicago, right? Everybody from the far-flung suburbs of Chicago goes, oh, yeah, I'm from Chicago. If you said, you know, that somebody from Stellicum was a Seattle kid around here, probably not. But fun fact, we could almost see his high school from where we filmed last year's portion of the off-season preview series at the house on the water. Like, looking across the water, not Chris Olave's, but Emeka Egbuka's high school was just over the rise, which is kind of fun. So yeah, there's a huge need. He would come back. He would fit very well, that's for sure. And that's the bottom line with a guy like Egbuka is I can't think of very many places where I'd be like, nope, they just really don't need him. He's so good, and he would upgrade most of the passing attacks in the league right now. And that's rare praise for a rookie.
Yeah, I brought him up as an option for the Chargers in the first round. And, you know, I got some pushback from people like, well, don't they already have that with Ladd McConkey? I'm like, you're telling me you wouldn't want two Ladd McConkeys on the same team? Like, I don't know, that sounds pretty dope to me. So, he fits everywhere. For my first gem, I want to keep it with receiver and bring up somebody who is a different profile, or a different skill set, I should say, but will probably end up going in the same general range as Egbuka, and that's Trey Harris from Ole Miss, who is more of a traditional X receiver. You know, he's going to line up outside. He's going to box with press corners. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got everything you want to handle that kind of tight press coverage outside. But he's a lot more nuanced than I think people give him credit for. And that's simply because of the offense that he played in. And you really got to dig into Trey Harris to, I think, understand what he is fully capable of. And we only got like 7 games of him this season, but he put up 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns in 7 weeks. Like, that's how productive he was. Had an absurd yards per route run of 4.91, which means basically every time he ran a route, he got 5 yards, whether he was targeted or not, on average. Like, that's well above everybody else in this class. Like, not even close, right? And then he got injured, missed a few weeks, came back, got a 43-yard touchdown, then was done for the year. So, again, we don't have a massive sample size of him from just this year, but even going back to last year, like, I thought he was really good last year too. You know, contested catch rate is 61.5%, which you typically want to see in like that outside prototypical receiver. And even though, again, going back to the nuance point, 70% of his routes were either curls, goes, and posts. You know, he kind of got that DK Metcalf treatment at Ole Miss. And even though he only had, I think it was 12 deep in cuts and deep out cuts the entire season, he ran those really well when given an opportunity to do them. So I don't necessarily think that, you know, the goes, posts, and curls is the only thing he can do. That's just what, Lane Kiffin made him do because he's really good at it. 25 of his 62 catches were explosives, which is a huge explosive rate, but he only had an ADOT, average depth of target, of about 12.1, which is like 32nd just in this draft class. So it wasn't that they were just throwing him bombs down the field. He also had a really good yak per reception number as well at 7.6. So all that to say, because I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers out at you, and we're going to have some tape going as well. You have a guy with excellent deep ball speed and tracking ability, good yak skills, good contested catcher, can line up outside and box with press corners, can run any route in the book if you actually give him a chance to. He's got good feet, he's got good hips, he's got good speed. Like, that's a complete receiver. So even though you look at this receiver class as a whole and you don't see like a Malik Neighbors, you don't see a BTJ, you don't see a Rome where you're like slam dunk potential top tier number one in the NFL, it doesn't mean that there's not guys in this class that couldn't be number ones in the league. And I think Trey Harris is one of those guys that could be a number one in the league. And for all we know, once he gets out of that Lane Kiffin system and he gets an opportunity to show what he can really do, he might end up being a top tier number one in the league. He's got the skill set for it, just got to stay healthy. But I really, really like Trey Harris. I think he's going to be one of the best receivers out of this class, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a day one pick.
Classic case of out of sight, out of mind. And the injury was a large part of that, obviously, but everybody is lusting after Matthew Golden. And no slander to Matthew Golden, great wide receiver, but he had 987 yards on 58 catches, and it took him almost twice as many games as Trey Harris. Trey Harris's numbers very, very similar. 1,030 yards on 60 catches, a little higher yards per catch. 9 touchdowns for Golden, 7 for Harris. But if you look at the dialogue right now, there are people saying, oh, Matthew Golden could be the first wide receiver off the board. And you're not hearing Trey Harris's name in that conversation. And you probably should be, as long as people are satisfied with the medicals, because he does have many of the same traits. But this happens to guys who lose half a season or, the last 5 games of a season due to injury. And, one of their contemporaries goes on a run, plays in the national championship, does really well. All of a sudden the profile is really high, and you look back at the overall body of work, the tape, the size, the production, and you go, well, these are kind of very similar guys, but we're not hearing similar conversations about them. So I'm with you. Trey Harris is probably going to be more, and he's going to be a value for somebody because of that. And it's good for the team that gets him. I hope he stays healthy because he is exciting, and all the things you said. Especially, I like his work along the boundary with his size. He uses it really well. There are plenty of guys that have that size that don't have a contested catch rate that's greater than 50%. Lots of them have, lower contested catch rates. We highlighted many of them last year as like, hey, they should be good at this, but they're not. Trey Harris actually is. It's a real value. We were just talking about X wide receivers. Like, he could be an X in the league. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think top tier contested catch rates in the NFL typically hover around like 55%. People would think it's like 80-20, but there's like one guy I can remember off the top of my head who hit 80-20 in the last 5 years, and it was AJ Brown like once. Yeah. So like 55% usually is where like the top tier contested catch guys sit, anywhere between there and like 60, mid 60s, let's just say. So if you're over 60 on contested catch rate, that's pretty darn good. Okay, number 2 gem. Who you got?
Going to the trenches. Have to. Think it's important, and certainly if we learned anything from this year's Super Bowl, it should be. And going to go down the board a little bit. Not necessarily going to be one of the first guys off the board, but one of the guys that impressed me on tape and then impressed me in a different way at the Combine when we got to see him up close. And it's Jonah Savaiinaea from Arizona, and played tackle there as a Wildcat, but really took not just one look, took several looks at him at the Combine in multiple drills. It's a combination of things with him. It's the way he moves, it's the way he's built, and I think he can be a top tier guard, and I'm not talking about eventually. I'm talking about out of the gate, starting day one, top tier guard for a long time with a very successful career in the NFL, because I think a lot of times when a guy plays tackle in college and somebody goes, oh, he's a guard, it's a backhanded compliment. It means he can't play tackle. This is a very experienced player at tackle on both sides, and that gives him tremendous versatility. And we've seen that versatility come into play the league. There's only 53 on your roster, and sometimes somebody goes down, and you could look at Jonah and go, look, man, it's a pinch, but I need you to play right tackle today. And he'd probably do great. But I think his best position and his real value in the league is going to be a guard, because he is just a solidly built human being. And I am talking about top to bottom, hands, arms, shoulders, backside, calves, feet. You mentioned his feet on an earlier episode. They're huge.
Oh, it looks like he's wearing snowshoes. And they're still so nimble. Like,
right.
I don't understand how somebody whose feet are that big, like they don't trip over themselves constantly. Like, he's just a massive human being, and he's so balanced, so nimble, so agile. Like, I agree with you. Like, yeah, if you want him to play tackle in a pinch, like an Elton Jenkins type, he can do that. I think he does have the athletic movement ability for that. But similar to like a Tyler Smith, it's like, okay, solid starting tackle, ridiculously good guard. Like, that is we don't say this lightly because it's hard to play 10 years in the NFL. I could see him playing 10 years in the NFL as a guard, like truly, and starting the entire time.
Yeah, I think 6 to 7 years is a very good mark for anybody in the NFL. That's literally twice the league average I think it's 3.4 or 3.6 years is the average NFL career. If you come out and play as a starter at a high level for 6 or 7 years, you've had a very good career. People say 10-year starter all the time. That's exceedingly rare, especially for the same
that's
team.
why I'm saying it, because like I'm trying to convey how rare I think he is. Like, this guy's really, really good, and you're probably going to get him. Well, I think third round would be pushing your luck. You'd probably get him in the second round, though.
I think 70s, somewhere between 55 and like 75 is his prime range. Usually we're talking about guards going, there or later. He's one of the first ones I would go after because, again, I believe he has the ability to start. If you have a hole at guard, if you do not have a starting guard right now, or you have a starting guard right now that you desperately need to replace, I think you could draft Jonah, have him come in, compete. He's going to win the job, and I don't think he's leaving the lineup. Like, he is a rugged dude. He is going to give you everything you need. He is scheme versatile. If you want to run power gap, he is easily strong enough to do that, and he has a great base. You need him to get out and move, and this was the thing that really impressed me at the Combine. Those big feet get up and down, and he is quick with them. He can redirect, and he can absolutely be... He's not a sprinter, but you talk about dancing bear, like he can get out and still hit people, that agility, that power, all that. So it's not really like, oh, well, we only have one scheme. Is he going to be okay? I don't care what your scheme is. This is a high level starting guard, I believe, in the NFL. He's just going to get better with time, but he's already very good, very versatile. Again, a guy you're probably going to pick up in the second round. That is tremendous value and why he's one of my gems this year.
My second gem, I'm going to keep it with the offensive line theme. Also, probably a day two offensive lineman. That's Charles Grant from William & Mary, who is an exceedingly rare athlete, right? We're looking at 6'5", 311 pounds. Didn't start playing football till his junior year of high school, by the way. So, like, he's still kind of a puppy when it comes to football, but he's got 35-inch arms, former wrestler, and you can tell. Again, that nimbleness, that agileness, the balance that he plays with, even though he plays high, in my opinion, a lot, like the wrestling background still helps him stay balanced and still helps him just control people so well. And I just wonder what he's going to look like when he actually does play with good pad level and really weaponize his length and weaponize his athleticism, because he is a freak athlete. Like I mentioned, he came late to the sport. He was a wrestler, then played football as a junior for the first time ever, immediately became all district, ended up going to William & Mary. And then his freshman year kind of got ruined by COVID, but started as a redshirt freshman, then became all conference as a sophomore, then all American, became a captain. Like, first half decade this guy ever played the sport, he became one of the best players in the nation. So I still think the sky's the limit with him, considering his tools. Like, on tape, boy, I look at him when they're doing the wide zone run game, and I see how effectively he can reach block, how effectively he can get to linebackers in the second level, how good he is in space, how in control he is. And I just drool, right? Like, this is the exact kind of tackle you want in like a Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, Kevin O'Connell type of zone-based run scheme where you really kind of need athletic tackles that can do that kind of stuff. I'd throw the Browns out there as well. They're looking for tackle. I could see them investing in him on day 2. And as a pass protector as well, for a guy who's so new to playing football, like I thought he was very well developed. Now, I did start with the 2024 tape, and I wondered if he was a Duke guy, and then come to find out he actually was at O-Line Masterminds, the one that you and I were at last summer. So it's like, okay, because he kind of plays with like the independent hand placement, and I'm like, that just looks like Duke Manyweather teaching. And yeah, he's a Duke guy. So I think if you're looking at the character and the work ethic and the physical tools and the tape, I mean, the tape is excellent. Like, I just love Charles Grant as a day 2 tackle prospect. I don't know if he's going to go day 1 just because, again, how often does an OT from William and Mary go in the top 32 picks? Like, that's rare air. And again, we have to factor in the competition level and all that kind of stuff. But like day 2, if I'm taking a flyer, or if I'm the Texans and I recently traded my franchise left tackle because we're stupid, and we need somebody who can play right now, like I would take a look at Charles Grant on day 2. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to have the mix of tools he has. The size, the 35-inch arms are rare enough, but the thing that struck me in watching the tape that I watched is how well he moves with those very long levers, especially young players that are really tall, really long, and haven't been playing football for a long time tend to not move really as one. They're still figuring it out. How fluidly he moved with that frame, both in pass protection and, like you said, out on wider zone runs, picking out people in space. I can live with the high pad level. It's there. I think it can be fixed. Again, I'm really excited to see what happens to this guy when he gets with veteran leaders, even more experienced coaches, and really goes, hey, how do you do that? Or they say to him, hey, you're doing this is what people are going to pick on. Don't do that. He's learned so much in a very short period of time, 5 to 6 years. I'm giddy with excitement to see what the next 3 years are going to bring for an athlete like that when he gets dropped into the sort of pure competition level of the NFL and he's surrounded by people that he can just pick up things from on a day-to-day basis, because he still has so much to learn and he's already a really good player. So you mix the tools with the potential, and I get very excited about Charles Grant.
All right, gem number 3, you're up.
I got to go running back. This class is extremely deep at running back, and I was thinking about only doing 1, even though we didn't talk about Ashton Jeanty. I'm still doing 2. Yes, it is that deep. Everybody knows I love running back tape, and this year's class is an embarrassment of riches. There is no other way to say that. I'm going to start off with Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa, who I think, unlike Charles Grant, is a little more scheme specific. He did not do a lot of power gap runs. He did a lot of wide zone runs. If you're familiar with Iowa football, that's not really surprising, but he's excellent at it. He is so freaking good and custom built physically to excel in that system. All the stats I'm going to give are for running backs with over 150 rushes, because there's a lot of college football running backs, and I wanted to break it down a little bit. So just keep that in mind for every stat I bring up. He was tied for 7th in the nation in yards per attempt in 2024 at 6.4. He forced 66 missed tackles on 240 rushing attempts. That's 27.5% of the time. Now, for reference, Quinshon Judkins, the Ohio State back, everybody gets excited about him. He was 43 on 193. That's 22%. Also a very good number. Omarion Hampton, 73 on 281. That's 25.9%. So again, Kaleb Johnson's still higher. Everybody goes, oh, Cam Skadbu, all he did was break tackles. It's true. 103 out of 294 attempts. That's 35%. That is
and
ridiculous.
What's Ashton?
Yeah.
Come on, get to the big one.
It's there. 152 on 375. That's 40.5% of his runs he forced a missed tackle.
Stupid.
It's absurd. It's the reason we're not talking about him, but a very good missed tackle forced rate for Kaleb Johnson. And how does he do that? Well, he's a scary combo of size to run over a defender. He's 6'1", 224, which is pretty darn big for running back these days, and the speed to run away from them. When you combine that with the scheme, you get a very special fit, because in outside zone, there is probably only going to be one defender that is tasked or really free to come get Kaleb Johnson. And if he can run him over and run away, which he did at an extremely high rate at Iowa, it makes him very, very dangerous. If you can only get one guy over there in the blocking scheme, that is not a good matchup for you, because Kaleb Johnson's going to beat him straight up one-on-one. Don't be fooled by the 40 time. He ran 4.5 something at the combine, and I don't care. So I reached out to our buddies at Next Gen Stats, and I said, how was he in actual speed on field drills? Because on tape, he looks faster than 4.5 whatever to me, because he runs away from guys all the time. He was fourth fastest at the combine in the rushing drills, and that is backed up by tape. So here's all the numbers that really make him deeply dangerous in that particular scheme. He's third in the nation in yards after contact per attempt, behind Jeanty and Damian Martinez. 4.42 yards every time after he got touched. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Tied for sixth in rushes over 10 plus yards. So that's explosive rushes. He had 43 of those. This is where it gets really scary. He was second in breakaway yards in the entire country. 861 of his total yards were on breakaways, and the percentage of yards that he got on breakaways was 56.1. So he's really good at finding that single defender that's accounting for him, running him over, and then just running away from the rest of the field, which is kind of why I don't care about his 40 time. If you're worried about that, go to the tape. Obviously, there are a lot of examples. You won't have to look at very many games before you find exactly what I'm talking about, because this is largely how he made almost all of his yards. He has really good vision, obviously explosive, talked about all those things, but if you put him in that system, I think he has the chance to be one of the most productive backs out of this class, and that's really saying something, because this is a special running back class.
If I had to knock him for anything, I do think there's some stiffness there. I do think he runs a little bit upright, and I think that showed itself in the combine as well. Like, there's some guys that were really sinking their hips into every single cut, and just having this crazy lateral agility, teleporting from hole to hole. And then you watch Kaleb go through, and it's a little bit more herky jerky, but then he would take off and you're like, whoa, okay, he can run. And that, I think, kind of solidified the comp in my mind of Darren McFadden, who, when Darren McFadden broke away, nobody was going to catch him. When somebody squared up on Darren McFadden in space, he wasn't going to jump cut to make a miss. He was going to take just the right angle to make you go into his thigh pad, and he was going to run you over, and then he was going to run away from you. And McFadden was not super loose. He was not super laterally agile, but in those kinds of run schemes, those wide zone run schemes where it's really more about making one cut and then just getting up the field, not necessarily stopping and starting, but just changing your vector. Derrick Henry, I think, also falls in that mold, but Derrick Henry's just the best of that mold, maybe ever. But I think that Darren McFadden-ish type of play style is what really suits him. And I'll tell you what, Darren McFadden, had a lot of injuries in his career, but when he was at his best, he was one of the 5 to 7 best running backs in the NFL in his time. So if you're getting that as a day 2 pick, even if he's not the full Darren McFadden experience, if he's diet Darren McFadden, that's worth day 2 to me. I think he's really, really talented. You get him into a wide zone scheme, maybe running behind Charles Grant even. And I think that he would be really, really productive. I think he's one of these backs that starts out as a number 2, and then all of a sudden the number 1 gets hurt, and then he gets 17 carries for $120, and there we go. We're off, right? It's the Kaleb Johnson show at that point. So really, really talented back. Again, the 4.57, that was weird to me.
Yeah.
Like, I almost did a double take when I saw it, because I was like, there's no way that he runs 4.57. And I think, it's another one of those game speed versus time speed things. And I trust the game speed on that.
Yeah, I do as well. And it was very surprising to me, given all the times that he ran away from very fast defenders in his conference on tape. Once he ran that guy over, Yeah, he doesn't have a true fifth gear, but he's got like 4 in overdrive. Like he got caught a few times by very, very fast players, but everybody else, he can keep a gap on and run the 60 plus yards that he needs to score the touchdown. So yeah, if you put him in San Francisco, as an Elijah Mitchell replacement, like let's go.
I'm going to keep it with running back myself as well. Just kind of mirror you throughout this entire episode. RJ Harvey. Is my next gem.
Yep.
I adore RJ Harvey. Compact, explosive runner. Even better missed tackle force per attempt rate than Kaleb Johnson, believe it or not, at 0.3, which is a monster number. 71 missed tackles force on only 235 carries is nuts. Again, nobody touches Ashton Jeanty in this class, but he's one of the guys in like that next tier of tackle breaking ability. Excellent change of direction ability. He's like the polar opposite of Kaleb Johnson as far as like style goes, in my opinion. He's very much more like a Jalen Warren type, like even build wise. Like he's just shorter, more compact. He's like 5'8", 205, right? Not a super big guy, but when you watch him sink his hips and just kind of explode into these cuts, like he damn near teleports. He's such good feet. Such good lateral agility. And, oh, by the way, he runs low 4.4s, and that is true game speed and track speed. Like, that shows up on tape, just like Kaleb Johnson, but he also reflected it in the 40. Like, absolute breakaway speed once he gets outside, but he can also make you miss to get there. He can run over you a little bit. I don't necessarily think he brings the same physicality that Kaleb Johnson does because he's 20 pounds lighter, but, like, there's some runs on tape where he just straight up ran over people. So, like, he still has that pop to him. He can catch the ball a little bit for you. The one knock that people have on him is his offensive line was really good. At least as far as college football standards go, he was, they were a top 5 rushing team in the nation, and he had a yards before contact per carry average of 2.9, which was highest in this draft class by a fair margin, right? Like he just wasn't touched for the first 2.9 yards of every single carry. So you could argue, okay, a lot of his production was because he had guys up front that were kicking ass and taking names, but I also have to then go back to the missed tackles force per attempt. And it's one thing, if he was getting a bunch of yards before contact and then never made anybody miss, but when you get yards before contact from your offensive line and then still make people miss and get a bunch of yards after contact and break a whole bunch of tackles, that's where I think you see a top 5 overall run game come from. The offensive line sets the floor, the running back sets the ceiling. And that is a philosophy that I've really come to appreciate over the last couple of years, especially looking at a team like the Eagles, who just won a Super Bowl with that philosophy, right? They had a dominant offensive line that set the floor. Their average yards before contact in Philly was the best in the NFL, but you had a running back like Saquon that was better than Miles Sanders, better than DeAndre Swift, and raised to their ceiling and paid off that offensive line better than previous running backs did. So I look at RJ Harvey as somebody who, yes, benefited from a good offensive line, but also maximized that situation better than most running backs ever would. So I don't really hold it against him. I think he's a tremendous player. I think he's a day 2 pick in his own right. And I'm not 100% sure whether that means second round or third round yet. If there's an early run on running backs, maybe he sneaks into late 2. He'll probably end up in the third round, but like this could be a starting running back for you that you're going to get in like the 90s, like the 80s and the 90s. Like that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, and less scheme specific certainly than Kaleb Johnson. Very impressive runner in person. Looks like he is absolutely just chiseled out of iron, top and bottom. Sort of feels like he's maximized his fitness. He has a viciously sharp sidestep cut, which I love. And for a guy that is extremely quick and pretty darn fast overall, you know the difference if you've been listening to my work for a while, he doesn't always just put the hammer down and go. He waits to punch the accelerator. He will wait a long time. He is very patient to watch late blocks develop. So yes, he had good linemen in front of him, but to your point, he also used them really well. He wouldn't just get the ball and say, well, I'm faster than that guy, or I'm, tougher than that guy, so I'm going to run through him. Some running backs do that. That's the only speed they know. He varies his speed very well in the backfield, and especially around the goal line. You will see him just be patient to the hole and then use that acceleration and that power to sort of dart through the hole that opened up a little bit later. Again, if he'd pressed the run earlier, it wouldn't have been there. I really like that about his game. Really subtle motions mid-run to kind of subtly adjust his angle and just make the contact less effective. Run through that. Again, not as big or strong as Kaleb Johnson, but again, uses his gifts the way he has them to maximize his ability. That's one of my favorite things about him.
All right, gem number 4. Is this another running back?
No, it could be, but it's not. You could play him at running back, and his team has, but no, I don't think that's his best life. This is Tyler Warren, the quote-unquote, and I'm going to put it in air quotes, tight end from Penn State, because...
I mean, he's like 20% running back. That kind of counts, right?
They lined him up this year in the slot, out wide, at fullback, wildcat quarterback, and my favorite alignment he had this year was as an eligible center. Yes.
Which worked, by the way.
You read that correctly. Eligible center. They used an unbalanced alignment. There was nobody covering him up, so he was an eligible receiver. He snapped the ball, and yes, he caught the touchdown on that play too, folks. This is a former high school quarterback who just sort of, I think, outgrew the position. He is extremely versatile as a football player. He also happens to be a very good tight end. He's tough. He's got good size. Loves to use that size to bury defenders. We see a lot of tight ends who are glorified receivers, power slots, who can run away from people, have very sharp cuts. That's not necessarily Warren. He likes to run them over, and he's good enough to do that. I'm not saying he is not agile. He is, but he is not as agile as others. He knows that, and he uses his gifts again to his advantage. Really good stiff arm, almost 700 yards of yak this season. So he is not done when he catches the ball. Some other tight ends in this class are. They have very limited yak opportunities for you. Warren is not that guy. Really, really good athlete. Some of the goal line dives he has running as a wildcat quarterback are wildly impressive. He gets himself completely horizontal and like at the level of his linemen's helmets. That's like 6'4", 6'5", and just sails over everybody.
I can't wait to see his jumps. I think they're going to be stupid. I think he's such an underrated athlete, especially when it comes to like getting up there.
Explosive power. I bet he can hoop. I'll put it that way. He uses the stab step really well as a route runner to set up defenders. You'll see him make that explosive step to the inside, and they'll bite, and then he goes the other way. Leads to him being pretty darn open. Decent stop move as well. He used that versus Oregon, where he can just let defenders fly by and then again start to look for opportunities to use that size, that power to run people over. He was, as you can tell, one of my favorite football players in this class from very early on. And then I heard that he wears number 44 because his dad watched John Riggins and said, "Son, that's the way I want you to play football." Done. Turn in the card. I am set.
I mean, he does. Yeah,
he absolutely did exactly as his dad said. He understood the assignment, that's for sure. DJ posted today, as I posted about a month ago, boy, he'd be fun for the Bears because they'd be a true 12 personnel. They'd have a lot of flexibility. I said, look, you put this guy that can do all these things. Yes, he has thrown passes as a Wildcat quarterback. He's not just a runner. He's caught them. He's been in on reverses. Again, snapped the ball as a center and caught a touchdown. Can you imagine Ben Johnson's like tomes of trick plays being unleashed through Tyler Warren? I'm not saying it's the best use of draft capital. I don't necessarily believe it is, but holy crap, it would be fun.
I mean, I would do Tyler Warren and RJ Harvey, two former quarterbacks that no longer play quarterback. Like, just have everybody but Kaleb throw passes because you can. Like, well, oh my God. It's the dream offense. Have Kaleb catch him. I don't give a shit.
Right.
Like, they built a good offensive line this year. You can do whatever you want.
That's
Ben,
right.
Like, world's your oyster. No, I love Tyler Warren. He's not the loosest athlete as far as like flexibility and fluidity. I think, Colston Loveland is looser. Elijah Arroyo, gonna get that by the end of draft season. I always Elijah Arroyo. I never actually pronounce it correctly. Elijah Arroyo. He's looser and more fluid, but as far as just linear acceleration and explosion and power go, like Tyler Warren is the man in this draft class. I personally have a grade on him comparable to Brock Bowers, and I know a lot of people would take issue with that, but to me, I look at Tyler Warren as also a different kind of player than Brock Bowers. I think Bowers is like a pure big slot, a power slot, whatever term you want to use for it. I think Tyler Warren is a Y tight end, and overall their grades are very similar. It's just they play different spots. And hell, Tyler Warren is the type of tight end that you pair with Brock Bowers. So I think he's even in play for the Raiders at 6 if Jeanty's gone. And then, we've heard some talk about them trading Michael Mayer. Like, just get a better version of Michael Mayer with Tyler Warren. And then you also have Brock Bowers and you have Geno Smith and, insert day 2 receiver. And all of a sudden you're cooking with gas, right? So, like, I think he can go anywhere from, probably pick 6 down to the absolute latest would be the Bengals, in the late teens. Like, he's going to go that high, and he deserves it. He really is that good of a player. Line him up anywhere, have him do anything, even throw a couple passes here and there, and he's going to be a damn good day 1 contributor. Now, 4th gem on the docket for me, going back to the offensive line because I have to. Like, this is such a good interior offensive line class. I can't not talk about any of them. Going with Gray Zabel, the tackle / guard / center / whatever you want him to be from North Dakota State. I know he's got 32-inch arms. I don't really care. He's the kind of guy who, in a pinch, can play tackle for you, like Joe Thuney did with similar length for the Chiefs last year. Like, if you're absolutely boned and you need him to play left tackle, he's got the feet to do it. Now, he's probably going to end up as a guard or center, and he will be tremendous there, just like Thuney is at guard. By the way, Chicago Bear, Joe Thuney. We haven't done our free agency show yet as of time of recording this, but damn good pickup for them.
Yep.
Where was I? Oh, yeah, Gray Zabel. 1.6 pressure rate allowed, which is ridiculous. That is 11th among all tackles in the nation at any level of football. I'm not talking FBS. I'm not talking FCS. Like, there's 460 college teams in PFF. And out of those 460 college teams, they all had multiple offensive tackles. Some of them had several offensive tackles. He was 11th out of thousands of tackles that played this year in terms of pressure rate allowed, 1.6%. His quarterback, as far as reps that were his fault, got touched twice the entire year. Like, he is that good. So I understand it's a big leap from, playing North Dakota State's schedule to an NFL schedule, which is why he's probably going to be a center or a guard in the NFL. But he showed up to the Senior Bowl and played center and guard and dominated. He went to the combine and he looked like the best interior offensive lineman and one of the best overall offensive linemen there. And he was lined up against a bunch of guys, with the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12. Like, he was better than everybody, at least almost everybody out there through the drills. Like, I think he's a tremendous athlete. I think he's a day 1 starter. The one wonky thing as far as fit goes, because I know some teams are going to think he's going to be a better center, but the teams that think he's a center that will draft him will only be the teams that have a veteran quarterback, because I'm not sure if he's called protections before, because he'd be brand new to the position. I don't think he has ever done that. So you kind of want to pair him with a quarterback that's going to handle all that kind of stuff for him while he kind of gets acquainted to it. And over time, I'm sure he can kind of learn how to do it, but he's not a center that I would say put in Chicago, right? And call protections for Kaleb in his second year in a brand new offense. Like, wouldn't do that. I'd make a play guard in Chicago specifically, but they also have guard taken care of. So he's probably not going to be a bear, much to EJ's woe. Yeah. But for teams that either A, see him as a guard, he's a day 1 pick, or B, teams that see him as a center but already have a veteran quarterback, like, he's probably a day 1 pick for them as well. I can't see him slipping out of the top 32. I'd be stunned if he did. Like, maybe the only way he does is if there's like a medical thing I don't know about, or if he is a serial killer. I don't know about that either. Like, he is really, really, really good. best interior lineman in this class, better than Tyler Booker. And I know people would be shocked by that, but I really think he is. And if he is still on the board by pick 25, I'd be surprised.
I would as well. This was one of our coin flips. We have these every year when we're starting to work up these lists for offense and defense. And I'm like, all right, we're talking about this guy. Is it going to be you or me? Like, I don't really care. You chose him. Happy to have it that way.
Well, you got Jonah.
I got Jonah. So we had a couple of coin flips, right? And we just want to talk about these guys as football players. Zabel would have been on my list if he wasn't on yours. I believe he's extremely versatile. He is rare in that versatility. Guys that can truly play 5 positions for you, like Ashton Jenkins, who is the sort of model of that in the NFL, do not grow on trees. There are maybe 5, 8 of them in the entire NFL, tops
at most.
And the ones down at 8 probably aren't going to be doing some of those roles well. You're talking about a very rare handful of guys. And with as well as he played at tackle, the fact that he can play inside and did so against top competition without having done it a lot at the Senior Bowl and looked as smooth as anybody there is a ringing endorsement for the versatility, for the value, the reason he'll go in the first round. Before the Bears signed, Drew Dahlman in free agency, if there had been a trade down, I believe it would have been for a guy like Gray Zabel, regardless of, you can have somebody else, right? They have Joe Tooney on one side, Jonah on the other. Somebody can call protections, right? Not a typical arrangement, but again, I think Zabel could have handled that physically. Now they don't need him. He'll go to another team. He will definitely start this year. He is an offensive lineman that has all kinds of capability and versatility in a league that is starved for, I would say, above average line play. He's going to be a hot commodity. He's going to go sooner than people think. A lot of people that sort of casually follow the NFL draft will be like, what? There's a guy from North Dakota State in the first round? Yep, 100% deserves to be there. Great pick, and he's probably going to play for a long time.
Well, I know who your last gem is by process of elimination. Speaking of coin flip, guys, if you didn't take him, I was. And you won that battle. So tell me all about Omarion Hampton.
Omarion Hampton is a guy I've been waiting 2 years to talk about. I've got tweet receipts. If you want to see that, folks, go look it up. He is the truth as a runner.
Good luck using Twitter search function for that, by the way. It doesn't really work anymore.
Hot tip for
I'm sure they exist, yeah.
Hot tip for the users at home. If you search on mobile, you can find your old tweets. If you search on PC, you cannot.
Is that why it never works for me?
I used to always search on PC. People would say, "Oh, you didn't say that," and I'd be like, "Hold on," and I would look it up. It is completely broken on basically browser functionality, but on mobile, it still works like it used to. So hot tip for everybody at home, because man, that was annoying me. So now they'll probably go break that too. But
mobile did break today on the first day of free agency.
Yes,
by the way, the day we're
sure
recording
did.
this, it broke like 15 minutes before.
Yeah, welcome
the deadline.
Welcome to Blue Sky, everybody. Anyways, Omarion Hampton. Everybody was all excited about Drake May, and with good reason. But I was drooling over Omarion Hampton because he is, again, if you're going back to the definition of a gem, this is not the greatest or the best or whatever else. This is a player you turn on and go, oh man, I want to grab some popcorn and watch the rest of this tape because this is fun football. And Omarion Hampton hits that definition to an absolute T. He's built like a tank, 6 foot, 221, runs with a ton of violence, and second in yards after contact with 1,222 this year. That's over 1,200 yards after getting hit. Like, if a running back has 1,000-yard season in total, people are like, that's awesome. He had well over 1,000-yard season after he made contact with defenders. That's tremendous. He's very quick for his size. 1.54 10-yard split, was the 8th fastest at the combine. Again, don't let that fool you. This is a very talented running back class. There are some guys that are smaller than him that hit faster numbers. That's okay. Shows very quick acceleration after his cuts. So as a guy that strings cuts together, that's great because he's not sort of bleeding off speed throughout the run. He's carrying speed throughout the run, and that puts tremendous pressure on defenses. Very sure-handed, only one fumble in 281 rushing attempts. He's good as a receiver as well. He was 12th in the nation for yards per route run among running backs who had 150 carries. Again, that's my sort of floor for looking at running back stats combination for the entire season. That is a very good mark. They didn't use him extensively there, but when they did, he paid it off. So that makes him, again, sort of not scheme specific. You could drop Omarion Hampton on any team in the NFL, and he would be an asset. The running game, the passing game, pass protection game, he is very solid. Can redirect linebackers. I'm not going to say at will, but he can do it, and that's what you need from a rookie running back to get them playing time, not get your quarterback killed. Plug and play, going to be a ton of fun to watch in the NFL. I believe his skills, size, vision, everything translatable.
I have two different comps for him. It's a football player comp and an athlete comp. And the first one I thought of before the combine. The second one I thought of at the combine while we were watching him do the drills. The football player comp is a hybrid between DeMarco Murray and Joe Mixon, right? Like the straight line speed and the power of DeMarco Murray. But he also has the build and kind of fluidity and flexibility of Joe Mixon, best way to put it. Like for like a 220-pound plus guy to be able to contort himself like he does. It's very Joe Mixon-ish. Which, if that sounds like an all-pro running back, it is. Like, he's that good. My athlete comp for him, though, and this came to me while we were watching the drills, and I think it was actually when he ran right by us when they were doing the swing route drill. And every step that he took, he was floating. Like, actually floating. He wasn't, picking him up and putting him down and kind of, what's the word? The piston type feet that some running backs have. Like, he would take a step and he would just levitate through the air until he landed on his next step. And then he would levitate again and he looked like a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
And that was my athletic comp for him, was a ballet dancer. And if you guys have ever seen like male ballet dancers, female ballet dancers, I mean, all of them really, like they have quads that could crush a fucking watermelon, but they can clear a stage in like 4 steps. And every step they take, they float to the next one. And it's this like beautiful violence in the way that they move. It doesn't seem violent, but it is, because you have to hit the ground with a vengeance with your feet to propel yourself that far in the air. But he does it so in control and so balanced and so quietly, like oddly quietly. He's very similar to Malachi Starks in that regard. Talk about Malachi Starks, where like I couldn't hear his feet when he was going through the drills. And I was just blown away by how he moved, like the physics of how he moved to be 221 pounds, floating through the air, effortlessly, changing direction. I haven't seen anything like that in person. And I'm sure it exists and has existed in the league. But I personally have not been up close to a running back in all the years that we've been up close to draft prospects, or at least running back prospects, that moved like him. Like, he is just a rare bird. And I don't understand why he is not being seen as like a top 20 lock. I don't understand why he's not in conversations, dare I say, with Ashton Jeanty, of being that kind of franchise-changing offensive player. And I know you and I have different opinions on how far away Omarion is from Jeanty. And you have a generational grade on Jeanty, and I have a monster grade on Jeanty myself. But like, I really don't think Omarion's that far off. Like, that is how highly I think of him. So, yeah, top 20 all day. I think, I pray that he goes to a team that has a good offensive line, so he's not fighting for his life like Saquon did. Because if he goes to a team that even has an average offensive line, like, this could be a kid that rushes for 1,400 yards as a rookie and then adds 300 to 400 more receiving and, gets the double-digit touchdowns. And we're looking at him as like a top 5-6 running back in the NFL, like right now. Like, that's how good he is. So I really, really hope he goes to the right spot, or just any spot that has a competent offensive line, dare I say Chicago, because like he would be that kind of running back for them.
Yeah, one of my favorite experiences of the past couple of years was watching you get fully Omarion Hampton pilled at the combine.
And that's the thing is, I loved him before that.
I know.
Like, I sat there mouth agape at the drill. Like, every time he did something, I looked at you and I'm like, are you fucking serious right now? Like, are you seeing this?
And you kept coming over to me like, did you? And I'm like, buddy, 2 years. Welcome to the club. Like, yes, absolutely. He is
like
that
Shaggy
good.
and Scooby-Doo. I was like, ghost. Like, it was fucking
100%.
ridiculous.
And I think, you asked why he isn't being considered that way. I think a little bit of the Emeka Egbuka problem is like he was really good. Omarion Hampton was really good 2 years ago, and then he was still really good this year. Didn't have the same shine on the program with Drake May leaving. Again, just sort of when a college player hits a peak and it's not the year that they're leaving, there's sort of this almost automatic fall. Very, very few of them come up with another season that is as good or better. And a little bit of that happened to Omarion Hampton. Nothing happened to him. Like, he's still the same guy that did all that crazy crap.
Not having Drake May happen to him, if we're being
honest. that did happen to him. But in terms of, again, taking a prospect out of his college setting, pasting him into the league, looking at that fit and saying, how's that going to work? The answer with Omarion Hampton is, I don't care where it is, it's going to work. Like, and it's going to work really, really well, and it's going to work right away.
Let me ask you this, because it kind of feels like the Raiders are freed up to take Jeanty at 6 now. So I think your dream of Jeanty in Chicago's on thin ice.
We'll see.
Would you be opposed to him at 10?
At 10, probably only because this class is so freaking deep. Like, you can go into I believe, well into the third round, possibly even into the fourth, and you're going to get folks that are very, very good running backs. That's how deep it is. So the opportunity cost of Omarion Hampton at 10, as opposed to, with only 9 players off the board, everything else that's going to be on the board, that would feel, not great to me. Kind of like taking, and 10 is really a problem because of the salary too, for any player, because 1 through 10 is salary slotted regardless of position. So if you take a lower paid position like tight end or running back or even inside linebacker or safety, which are all kind of needs for Chicago, you automatically make that player into one of the highest paid players as a rookie, which is a ton of pressure. So in a even small trade down scenario, just to get out of the top 10, I would have no problem with it all. You know that. Especially with what they've done with the offensive line, everything you said about going to a place where he doesn't have to fight for his life, he's not going to have to. He would be a great young running back to pair with Kaleb and that offensive line they have now. So it's just the 10 thing. It's not Omarion.
So right now, I just looked it up, and through the magic of editing, we're cutting.
We're going to fix that.
Right now, I want to say the 10th pick in the 2025 draft is going to make about $6 million per year in salary. That would be the equivalent right now to the contract of roughly like in between Devin Singletary and Miles Sanders, who is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15th highest paid running back in the NFL.
Okay, I'd take him.
Rookie.
I'd take Hampton for that money.
Yeah, once you're at 15, you're like, I mean, he's probably in the top 15. Right?
I'd have less problem. And again, you're very, very sure. And the whole point of having high draft picks is to spend them on good players. And I realize that there is a draft opportunity cost for the higher priced positions. We just saw it. Free agency kicked off today. If you are a left tackle and you are breathing, you're making $20 million a year or much, much more. If you are a top wide receiver, you're making that much. If you are a top corner, my God, like mama, let your boys grow up to be corners. JC Horn just got paid today. So there are premium positions for sure. Running back, for the most part, not one of them. This is also a very deep running back class. I would get all the arguments. And I also know that everybody would forget all the arguments as soon as he started running the football behind that offensive line in Chicago and just tearing folks up, because he would. And he's that kind of player. So there would be a short-term pain, about 4 months of bitching and moaning. He would take his first carry, go like 45 yards and run over safety, and everybody be like, no, we're good.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happened with Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit.
It took a little longer. It took a couple of years, but yep, they're good with that pick, 100%.
I mean, even you and I were like, they took Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 10? Like we like the player, but I was like, I don't know about that. And then, by week 6, we were like, okay, we're good. It worked out. He's pretty fucking good. Now, speaking of premium positions, by the way, my 5th gem is one of those quote-unquote premium positions that's making a lot more than running backs at the moment. Receiver, Jaden Higgins. Now, caveat, my original gems list had his teammate, Jalen Noel, on here.
Yep, sure did.
I couldn't decide which Iowa State receiver to do, so I literally flipped a coin this morning. I could not decide for myself. I left it up to the football gods, and the football gods told me Jaden Higgins. So I'm going to run through this, but know in the back of your head, Jalen Noel also deserves to be here. He's going to be my first honorable mention. But Higgins specifically, potential number 1 receiver. There's a few of those in this class, Trey Harris being one of them, Emeka Egbuka being one of them. Potential number 1 with size, speed, quickness, fluidity, and ball skills to be like a true X receiver, which is, again, the thing that a lot of offenses are looking for. If they don't want a quote unquote sacrificial X, they want a real X receiver. They want a real boy out there that can go toe to toe with like Patrick Surtain and catch a few balls on him one-on-one. Like Jaden Higgins has the profile that he might be able to do that for you. Again, I don't want to use the Patrick Surtain example too much because nobody catches anything on him, but like I could put him outside and know that he's not just going to be lost in a wasteland for the next 60 minutes. Like he actually can line up out there and threaten you vertically and threaten you physically and do more than just running go routes, which is what Iowa State had him do a lot. Like, in my opinion, they wasted Jaden Higgins. And to a degree, they also wasted Noel. And that's saying a lot because they were both really productive. He had 2.6 yards per route run, which is really, really good. But if you're looking at how they targeted him, and this is what kind of pissed me off when I was doing the evaluation, 29% of his targets were on go routes. He had 42 targets on go routes. 16 of them were catchable. Like, his quarterback situation was not good. And they just kept trying to use him like that. And it felt like you were just banging your head against a brick wall because it's like, okay, you have the receiver that can do it. He's getting open. Like, he's dusting people outside. His quarterback wasn't good. So on those 16 catches or 16 catchable targets, he caught all of them, no drops. And he had, I think it was almost 23 yards per reception on those. So again, put him in an NFL situation with a quarterback that actually can throw a fade, and he's going to be ultra productive as that X receiver on the outside that can win with size and physicality and fluidity and all that kind of stuff. But he can also line up in the slot too because he's a pretty darn good route runner. They didn't let him show that, but he can do it. So I look at both Higgins and Noel, and even though they were really good college players, I think they're going to be better pro players. And we're going to look back one day, almost kind of like Ole Miss with DK and AJ Brown once upon a time. And we're like, how did they waste that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you had two really good NFL receivers there. I think he could be a true number 1. I wish he had a better quarterback situation because his numbers would have been bananas. And I think he's going to, potentially be another, again, back half of the first round receiver that ends up playing with a playoff team, at least a playoff team from 2024 that has its shit figured out at quarterback. And he's going to walk into the NFL with the best situation he's ever had and be really, really productive.
I think you should start buying rain gear because Sam Darnold.
You are a Seattle Seahawk.
That's right. Sam Darnold is now a Seattle Seahawk, and they just let go of a receiver that had a lot of the same abilities. Jaden Higgins, I agree with you, was not used to his full potential, and that's pretty crazy considering the amount of production he had. But, man, Iowa State's got to be on your list Will McDonald, now these guys, they're just
And Will McDonald hit for me, by the way.
Of
Was
course.
a gem that actually worked out.
Yeah. So
No, I love their athletes. Like they're whoever's running their weight room is really kicking ass. I just wish that they also had any quarterback at all.
Yeah, it was difficult to watch a lot of his tape because he would get open and then it would get airmailed, and that just doesn't pay off. But it doesn't mean he didn't get open. Again, his route diversity or lack thereof is not something specific to Iowa State. A lot of college programs do this where wide receivers run 3 routes for them, right? And that's it. That's all they run. Doesn't mean they can't run more, just means that's what they want them to do for the most part, and they'll do it over and over and over again. And to your frustration, even if they're not great at it. And that's where it gets really difficult in the evaluation process. Like, stop doing that. He's beating guys off the break. I would like to see some other targets here. And I think we're going to see those no matter what pro, team he ends up with. There's going to be more diversity there. I think he can handle the load physically. I think he can win physically with where he is right now. Very good hands, as you mentioned. Doesn't drop a lot of targets. I think, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be a better pro than he was a collegiate for multiple reasons.
And athletically, when we were watching him at Combine, like he just looked different. And there were some pretty good athletes out there, but watching him go back to back with other guys, I was like, that's not the same. I was like, it almost reminded me of when we saw Zay Flowers at Shrine Bowl a few years ago go through drills the first day that he showed up to practice. He didn't practice the first day and then practice the second day. And so, we were kind of calibrated for watching everybody else go through the drills. And then Zay showed up and did them on day 2. And we're like, oh, that's the first round receiver.
Yeah, 5 drills.
That's what it felt like at Combine too. It's like everybody's going through it. And then here's Higgins just blowing everybody away. And we're like, oh, okay, that's the guy here.
It's an absolute dude, and it is, again, one of the benefits of being in a situation like that, an all-star game practice or a combine or whatever, where everybody's going through the same reps one after another in with, very similar quarterbacking or, very similar spacing, whatever, and you go, oh, no, that guy moves different, that guy cuts sharper, that guy's hands are cleaner, he doesn't fight the ball, and you just get to see it over and over and over, and it's that volume that kind of stacks up and really either confirms your suspicions or makes you go back to the tape and say, hey, what did I miss? So speaking of folks we missed, again, there's only 5 spots. There's a lot of players in college football, so we each got to put together an honorable mention list. We're just going to name names. We're not going to go into why they're honorable mentions. You can look them up. We will talk about them at other points throughout the draft process. But why don't you read off your honorable mentions list, and then I'll go after you.
So first one, again, the other Iowa State receiver, Jalen Knoll, who deserved to be in the 5. Just pretend it's a 6. How about that?
Sure.
I compared him to Santana Moss. He's much smaller than Higgins, but damn, he can run. So fast, so fluid, so explosive, great hands. Like, he made some catches down the field this year that were just absurd. I really, really like him. I think he's a day 1, at least number 2. So, some teams he'll be 3 if they see him as like a speed slot, but like he's playing on day 1. He's really, really good. Logan Brown, tackle out of Kansas. I was not familiar with his game before the combine, and then saw him do really, really well at the combine and watched him back and was like, oh, that's a damn good football player. Again, probably a value tackle prospect on day 2 if I had to bet. I'd be very surprised if he went after the 3rd round. Tate Ratledge is most likely going to be a 2nd round pick, but an immediate starter at guard or center. I think he could do either one in the NFL. Elijah Arroyo. Boom, nailed it. Tight end out of Miami. I see him as like the best receiver profile out of any of the tight ends this year, like pure receiver profile. I think he is more explosive and more fluid than Tyler Warren, even though Warren, I think, packs more power and more violence to his game. Like, Arroyo to me is like a Jimmy Graham caliber, like, oh my God, that is different as a receiver, right? And he's bigger than Colston Loveland. So I think he has the Colston Loveland receiving ability in a bigger package. Like, I think I could teach him how to be a Y. I'm not sure I could teach Colston Loveland how to be a Y. Like, Arroyo is just bigger. So again, potential fringe first round pick, most likely second round pick because of medicals. Like, he does get hurt a lot. Speaking of Jimmy Graham, like, again, the comp just kind of writes itself. And then Woody Marks is my final, originally was in my first gems when I was first writing this up. And then I just thought of other names and he ended up getting pushed out. But I love Woody Marks. He's like the James White of this draft class. I think he's going to play a really long time as a third down back. Really explosive, super shifty, great receiver. Like, I think immediately once he gets into the league, he's going to get third down work. And, maybe they can mix him in on early downs here and there as well, because he's not like small. I mean, he's small-ish, but he's not like, I can't give him first down carries small. I mean, shit, if Bucky Irving can do it, like Woody Marks can do it. So, again, immediate third down back in the NFL and hopefully more than that.
So much for just saying the names.
You know me, I can't resist.
I know. It's a lot of fun. Honorable mentions for me, more running backs, not surprising. Devin Neal, one of the first running backs I watched in this class, and he's the running back out of Kansas. Very, very talented runner who, again, is going to go later just because there are so many running backs in this class. Does not mean he is not a great all-around runner. And yeah, Logan Brown was a big part of opening holes for him. He did a lot with them, a lot like what you said about RJ Harvey. Jack Besh, the receiver out of TCU. I started off watching Savion Williams tape. I ended up watching Jack Besh tape. Then we saw him at the combine.
That's the arc that a lot of people went through, by the way.
And he has a lot of qualities mixed in from other receivers we've really liked, but it's this rare combination because he's not small. He's like 6 foot. He's over 200 pounds. But I think about like Kyle Phillips, right? The route running and the savvy, the ability to cut things off and snap back routes to the quarterback. He can do that at his size, but he also has the size and the speed and the hands. I just think he's a really versatile wide receiver. Jordan James, the running back from Oregon, is probably going to be one of the later players picked on this entire list of, gems and honorable mentions. I think he's still going to be really good. Can't wait to go see him at his pro day in a couple of weeks. And then Maliki Matavao, the tight end from UCLA, who can block. He is a true 6'6". He's well over 260. He's got a huge wingspan, makes him a very good pin blocker on the end of the line. I just wanted to see if there was a little bit more receiving ability in there. It looked like there was on tape, but again, not a lot of targets. Went to the combine, watched him do stuff like the pylon drill, and I was like, nope, they just didn't throw to him a lot. It's not that he can't catch, it's that they didn't use him that way. Very valuable player who's going to go way down the board, and he's going to end up being somebody's, maybe even TE4 or TE3. He's going to get on the field. They're going to be like, he could be our TE2 for the foreseeable future.
I'd bet Jordan James and Matavao probably go day 3. Not late into day 3, but probably into day 3. Besh, I wouldn't be surprised if he went 3rd round, but he's 4th round at the latest for me.
Yeah.
And then Neal.
It gets tough.
That one's tough because there's so many running backs.
Right. In a given year, in another year that wasn't so deep with running back, I really don't think he even gets out of the 3rd round. Like, no way.
He might this year because it's like, Bashal Tootin exists, right? Dylan Sampson exists.
It's all going to be eye of the beholder stuff. In a typical year, no way Devin Neal is not a day 2 pick. This year, if he is, it might be at the very end of the 3rd round, maybe even into the comp picks. He's a better player than that, but there's just so many good players at his position this year that you kind of can't pick them all. So, but somebody's going to get a great one with Devin Neal.
And whether he goes day 2 or day 3, he's a gem regardless because we just love watching him play. So that is our 10-ish gems for the 2025 NFL Draft. Defensive gems still to come. We have 5 more-ish for each of us to go. That's coming out next week. Last week was our free agency recap show, which as of the time of recording this, we still haven't recorded that yet, because we're recording this on the day that free agency opens, and then we're doing the free agency show in 2 days, but that comes out first, and this comes out, I don't know, it's a whole thing. So we're figuring out the scheduling, but go watch that, react to all of insert storyline that happened here that we don't know yet, We'll do a show about that. And then next week, defensive gems. I want to thank Fitzy, Connor, Liam, and Mike as well. Before we go, our executive producers over on the Patreon. Wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. And by the way, speaking of the Patreon, we still have that bonus episode on both of the Michigan defensive tackles. We have a bonus episode on comparing some of the top linebackers in this class. Jihad Campbell, comparing him to Carson Schwechenzer, Demetrius Knight, and I think it was Danny Stutzman. I can't remember exactly. Well, we talked about a lot of linebackers, but again, that's bonus content over on the Patreon. We're going to have other bonus content coming up, on receivers and tight ends and DBs and what have you. So if you're a patron, you can check that out. It's going to be a whole bunch of extra content for you over there. And if you're not a patron, you can go to the link in the description below and sign up, and you'll get a whole bunch of bonus content there. So with that, EJ, any final words?
Off to the next one, whatever that is. I'll just jump in the time machine and get there.
Yeah, I still think we're finalizing who our defensive gems are going to be, and I probably will be finalizing until the day we record that. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and we will see you guys next week.